This goes over the rudder lines on a Twist-n-Stow, and I'm using a Hobie Revolution. First thing for all the lines is the lines are not just one line. There's actually a forward line towards the bow. This is inside the hull, and there's a line going aft to the back. I'll just call that line A, and the forward one that goes to the bow, line B. Anyway, the important thing is how they're joined in the hull. I want to show you that. The bow line has a loop in it, and the other one, the A line, is simply attached by going, I call it a reef knot. Not sure if that's the real name. The line just goes up. Probably hard to see. It up and around the back of that loop, through the loop, back down, and you could see that as you pull it, they come together. And under tension, that'll hold tight. The important thing is, this is really easy to loosen or adjust to get the right tension. And when you finally finish, you put a stopper knot in this on the tag end. And I suggest a stopper knot that's easy to untie in case you ever want to do it again. Hobie tends to use overhand knot, which can be really hard to untie. And then if you want to ever loosen them, you simply, right where they join, this will just come apart and slide through. Now some of them, and this was on the older ones, they use a loop-to-loop knot. And the way that's done, it's common in fishing. Say they both have a loop. I didn't tie this loop. But the way it's done is one loop goes up through the other loop, and then you take a free tag end back here, and it's put through I got stuff on here. And you just pull them, put it through its own loop. As you pull them, the loops come together and they'll tighten up. The problem with that is you need a free tag end, so that once the lines are set up, you can't really, and you can't do any adjustment, because those loops, you don't know how it's really hard. I mean, the loops are set. So this first one I showed you is a lot easier to do the adjustment, and you could adjust it without taking the ends off the rudder. So again, it's just come up and around the back and then back down through the front. Didn't get that too good. In any case, the lines come out of the hull through there's white tubes inside the hull that go about to where the rear hatch is. And they've got a flange on this end, this black. So they can't pull into the hull, but they can pull out. And so if you're ever replacing the lines totally, you would want to again go into this hatch. And if you would reach in there, again, each one has a line at a bow, a line aft to the rudder, and they're joined right, I don't know if I can even see those white tubes, mine are zip tied up. At any rate, you would undo the loop knot there, and that frees up the line to the back. You can, once those are undone, you can pull. I'm not going to do this because I don't want to mess with my lines. It's a pain. But you can then pull any one of these lines out of those tubes. And if you need to, replace it or somehow adjust. The problem is rethreading a line back through these tubes. And the easiest way to do that is you could pull these tubes out. But again, once the loops are done inside. And typically, the only line you need to mess with or adjust or replace is the jumper line in the back, because the lines forward And that's one of the beauties of this system. Rarely anything happens to those. But sometimes these break back here near the rudder. So I just want to go over the steering versus the up-down. Start with the steering. So they come out on each side, left, right, and they are, then the left goes through the rudder and around this screw, and the right simply goes around the screw, and then they're just joined here, and there should be a little bit of slack, and they're just joined with some knots. The beauty of this is, if you just want to do an adjustment, the only thing, there's two ways to do it. One, you can just untighten these screws and pull it to get more tension, or pull it back towards the hull to loosen it up. And that's why you need some slack here. If this was perfectly tight, you'd never be able to get more slack in the lines. Same thing with this screw. So the left and right are easily done. I would just mention again, the other way to do it is, as I showed you before, is you could go inside and adjust the knot tension if you're doing that loop with a reef knot. To adjust the steering, it's best to do it with the rudder centered, and the lines, again, on my Hobie Revolution 13, might be different on other ones. The lines are about 3.5 inches coming out of the hull to the rudder on each side, and they're not real loose, but they're not totally tight. Just a little bit of bounce in there on each side, because as you turn the rudder, so what happens is, if you're going to steer left, the rudder's going to pivot to the left. This line, the left handle, the steering handle will turn left. This time, this line pulls it, but the other one gets a lot of tension because it's lengthening. So again, even though this one's not on the right side, it's not pulling, it's really getting a lot of tension. And that's why, and the same thing's reversed if you went the other way. This one gets, and the difference is, I forget about, they change around 2 inches. So again, that one gets a lot shorter. This one gets longer on the outside. And I'll show you how that works on the inside. But again, that's why that if these were totally tight, now this one would pull, but this one would get, on the right that's not pulling, would get so tight as it lengthened that it wouldn't turn all the way. Next, I just want to show you, on this particular one, it's set up the way originally, how Hobie intended, where straight, the handle is slightly pointed inward. And then turn the handle to the right, it's stopped here. And on this one, the handle doesn't go any further out. I'm going to show you why. Because I have 2 other Revolutions, and on those, the handle goes way out like this. So the rudder, and then straight, the rudder handle for straight is straight, as opposed to like on this one, where this is actually, the rudder back there is straight now, where this is cocked in a little, about 15 degrees. And so you don't have as wide a range of motion on this one, on the rudder. It goes about like that, and then it stops there. The other ones I have, I'm not going to show you. They'll go out further, so they'll turn better. However, that puts more tension on the lines, and I'm going to show you with pictures, not inside, but inside, underneath here, if you open up, there's a control handle underneath. I mean, the post for the control handles underneath. Let's go look at that. So these are the 3 Revolutions I have. The upper left is my newest one from 2023. And the blue arrow, you'll see, that's the one I was showing you out there. These are pictures. The blue arrow, because I'm obviously not in those 3 kayaks at the same time, on the upper left is pointing towards a black, I just call it a black plastic thing that sticks down, and that's what stops the rudder handle from turning way far to the left. You'll notice in the right picture, That's a 2018 Revolution, and there is no such black thing. So that's why that one, I don't actually show you the kayak itself, this handle swings much further and gives the rudder a wider range of motion. And the bottom one is also a 2023 Revolution. Who would have two of them except me? I don't know. And on this one, that black plastic thing was there, but it was cut off to give it a wider range of motion. It's just a thin piece of black plastic. Also, you'll notice in the red circle, they all have this same connection where the post from the handle's up there, comes down through the hull, and then there's a swing arm here in the red circle, and both of the steering lines are connected with a loop. They just hook onto that post. It's real easy to unhook them, and that's how you just give the lines a lot of slack if you want to do adjustment or to redo the knots on the jumper, those loop knots. You'll notice, though, that one line goes aft, the other one goes to the bow. They're going in opposite directions from the steering handle. Now, that's different from the very original Hobie Twist-n-Stow, where the lines both went backwards and they crossed. So if you have an older one, that's what will happen. On this one, the forward line is going, where's my finger? The forward line goes up towards the bow and there's a pulley. And then you can't see it too well, but it's coming back then. It actually then goes back. And that's why this, as the handle turns, this post swings forward or backward. And so it'll pull one line. So when you pull left, the handle left, this back line will go forward, pulls the rudder. Similarly on the other one, when you push the handle the other way, the post goes back and it's pulling through that pulley. Okay, so that's how it's underneath. The important thing here is I just want to mention that black plastic in case you want to get rid of it and give your handle and rudder a wider range of motion, and how the two steering lines from opposite directions both come to the same post and just hook on with a loop that's, again, real easy to unhook those. So the steering lines are easy. And in summary, you can unhook them for the post. The reason you would do that is so you can reach in here to the rear hatch and work with this knot, either adjust it or replace the line. Because it's really hard to just, under tension, they're up there, it's really hard to work on them without actually seeing them. So, oh, and I forgot one important thing. When you unhook them, up here, you go in here and unhook them. I highly suggest that you put some kind of long line on there, on the loop, like another line or a fishing line or anything. Don't tie it tight. Just, and then bring it out of the hull, because when you unhook them and you start to fiddle with these lines in the back, it pulls those lines back in the hull here, and you can't reach them unless you got really long arms or you're Mr. Stretch. So with the lines hooked, those extra lines hooked, you could then pull them back and rehook them. If you forget, you'll figure out how to fish them through. But if you can remember to tie something on so they don't come all the way back here, that'd be useful. And again, you could adjust the steering really easily with these screws. Now the up-down lines are different. Again, they all have the white tubes. They all have that same kind of loop connection. But the problem with the up-down lines is they come out of the hull and they don't have those adjustment screws like the steering lines. Instead, one line, I don't remember which, goes around the rudder inside this wheel, goes around one way, and the other line goes around the other way. Did I point the same way? The other line would go down, around, and up this way. And then they come out the same hole. This one's really hard to see. Let me I don't even know if you can see that. Yeah, there it is. They come out the same hole and they're knotted together. It's like it's a stopper knot. Now, I don't like what they did here. I've replaced, not on this kayak, but on other ones, I've replaced these myself. They tend to break more because they're under tension, unlike the steering ones, which have a little more slack. Anyway, when they break, you've got to undo that knot. And then when you want to adjust it, you've got to undo the knot. And what they've done here is they've left no slack line. And that knot would be extremely hard to undo, I would bet. So what happens is, to work with the steering lines, remember remember with the steering lines you had, you could just disconnect them from the post. That's not the case with the up-down lines. There's nothing up here that you could disconnect them. I mean, you could disconnect the pull handles, but I don't suggest that. Then you've got to fish them through. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way, is to give them slack. But if you see how these work, they have a shock cord. It's the same thing. The actual line is the actual line forward and the jumper line. But they have a shock cord that attaches to the line, which is to pull it tight so this one's pulled in. Otherwise, if there wasn't that shock cord, when you let go of these, they would just hang like this. Both of them would hang out and be flopping around. In any case, what happens is you need to work with these, you need to undo the knot inside. And so again, if you're adjusting or replacing, them, you've got to undo that knot, and then you've got to pull these lines, not just through the white tubes, but around the rudder the correct way in opposite directions and come out this same hole and do the knot. I'm not going to show that. That would be a real pain. I just suggest a few things. When you're doing these knots back here for the adjustment, what you would do is have the lines, they both come out. If you're replacing them, make sure you don't cut them off as close as they did. But you would pull the lines out and mark them, basically pull it where it's kind of tight, and then mark them with a marker, because what you have to do is then tie a stopper knot together. And I suggest you use like a Zeppelin knot, which is easier to untie than probably what they have done. Because when I've worked on these, the knots they use are really, really hard to untie. Sometimes you end up cutting them. So a Zeppelin knot, I've used it before, because then when you test the rudder and it doesn't quite work right, you could adjust the knot because it's easier to undo. So with the up-down line, you've got two painful choices. Again, this is if you're going to do adjustment. If you're doing a full replace, you've only got one choice, which is to undo this knot. But the one is to undo this knot back here and work with the lines to adjust them and then re-knot them. And if you're doing a full replace, you've got to pull one of them, whatever one you're working on. Usually you don't need both, although you could do both. You have to pull them back, both out and re-thread them back around here. It's kind of a nuisance. By the way, you would have to adjust. There's a nut here. You have to adjust to loosen this wheel, this round thing, to get at those lines. But again, you could undo the knot, and hopefully there's enough line there to adjust. Or what I was able to do is reach inside the hull. And if you do that, and again, it's hard to show. I'm not going to even stick my camera in. It'd take me 2 minutes to figure out the right angle. You'll find those loop knots that I was talking about. Problem is, the up-down lines are under more tension than the steering, and there's no disconnect up front to just give them a lot of slack. Again, with the steering lines, you can undo the post. You can reach in there and you pull the lines right up like this. Right up like this. You work with them right in your hands. You could see them, and then you just feed them back through and hook them to the post. What you have to do with these is just make sure that you don't have it cleated. They're both retracted. And then for the down line, you want to make sure the rudder is down. And when that happens and it's not cleated up there, the down line has some slack. Not too good with my camera. I should have a cameraman or woman. And then with that slack, you can reach in. I won't be able to do it. to pull it all the way out, but you can pull it. Plus, the shock cord that's in there is putting tension on the line. You almost need 3 hands. If you had 3 hands, it would work because you could pull with one hand, pull that shock cord so that you have slack in the line. But what I was able to do, which I can't show you, is I was able to reach in there, stick my head down and work with the knots, and you could loosen them or adjust them or even take them apart that way. Now with the up one, the up rudder, you want to make sure you put it, is it up or down? I'm confusing myself. Yeah, you want it up, and that gives these, oops, keep getting every finger's in the way, and that makes that one loose. And then you could reach in and pull it towards the back, but again, you won't be able to pull all the way out, and hopefully work on that knot that way. A couple other tidbit wrap-up items. I forgot if I mentioned them. Maybe I did. On these lines inside, you want to make sure you use a stopper knot just in case. And there's all kind of stopper knots. I personally like the Stevens Stoppador because it's easy to untie if you ever want to do some adjustment. Don't use an overhand knot. Those are really hard to untie, but there's other ones, figure of 8. And that's just to put a stopper in a single tag end. Now, for the back, like I said, with the knot that comes out of, the 2 lines come out of rubber, out of the rudder. There's different ones you could use. I used the Zeppelin knot, a Zeppelin bend to join the 2 together and act as a stopper. And again, because it was easy for me to work with, adjust it, untie it, and do that multiple times till I got the right tension. Also, again, if you're working with the up-down rudder knots that come out of the knots that come out, the lines that come out of the rudder. Again, if you're really working with those, you would not have them knotted and have slack in the line. You'd pull them. I think I did mention this. To try and get that tension that you want, it's hard to measure. And then mark them with a black pen or tape so that when you tie the knots back, because these lines will be very slack. That's the only way you could work on them, is to have them slack, to actually have the lines undone inside. The loop jumper knot, you'd have to have that undone to give this slack to work with these lines coming out. And you want to mark them. You don't want to just guess and tie a knot because it'll never be the right tension and you have to redo it. So what you would do again is you would have it hooked up inside. You would have the lines hooked so they are under tension. You have the lines pulled out to get this proper tension, which is pretty somewhat tense, but not, depending on where the rudder is. But not, drum tight for the most part. Again, because one of them will be a little looser than the other, depending on where the rudder position is, up or down. But I'll repeat, beating this to death, you would work with them under tension to pull the lines out to see where they would come out, to get that correct tension, mark them, and then go inside, unhook whatever line you're working with, or both of them. Usually you only work one at a time. And then you know where to tie that knot, where the mark is. Another comment about these tubes, as I said, they'll pull out once the lines are unhooked inside. But on the inside, again, not showing you, you reach in at the end of the tube on these newer models compared to the original ones. There's a little black, just like this has a little black piece. There's a little black tab inside, and you'd want to pull that off the tube, and it lays on the line. The line goes through it. I think that's to prevent water. I'm not a Hobie engineer. I don't work for Hobie. I'm just guessing at a lot of this stuff from what I observed, but I guess they keep the water from intruding. Originally, and I don't know if these still have them, the tubes would have an O-ring inside to keep water from dripping there. But I'm not sure they have that now, but they certainly have this black thing, this little black, almost like an O-ring, except it's a piece of black plastic that's easy to pull right off the tube. I'm doing it right now. And if you do that, if you're replacing a line, make sure you put the new line through that black thing. I made the mistake once of threading up the whole thing, and I had that black piece laying here. Had to redo the whole thing. And finally, the easy but more expensive way is just to buy the whole kit they give you with 4 tubes and lines already strung in there. But if you want to save some money and try it yourself, it's a learning experience. You don't have to buy anything except this line. A lot cheaper than buying the whole tubes and the line setup. And once you've done it, even though this video is lasting a long time, it'll probably take you this long to do 1 or 2 lines, or longer the first time. But once you've done it, you'll see that it's pretty quick and easy to do. I could actually do these quicker than what I'm doing in this video, partly because I showed the up, down, and the steering, which you're rarely doing all of them at once. So what normally is happening is I'm going to come in and just simply make adjustments with the screws or the loop knots inside. And it's pretty quick once you understand the setup. The whole key is, and that's why this video lasted so long, and it was disjointed, is there's different setups. Again, up, down is a little different than the steering, and neither of them have just a single line going from front to back. And once you understand that, it's pretty easy to work with. And once you understand how those knots work. I'll mention one more thing. I didn't know any of this before I started looking. And just basically, 2 things happened to me. One, on my earlier kayak, the up-down line broke. Actually, it was the down. And the up. So I had to replace them. They didn't break at the same time. So the first one was a real learning experience, and then the second one went smooth. And then this particular kayak, believe it or not, when I bought it, actually I bought 2, not at the same time. They both had the steering lines were reversed. Can you believe it? From the factory. And on one, I took it back to the dealer. I didn't even know what they did. They fixed it. But I don't even know how they fixed it other than they did, and they cut the black plastic thing off to give it that wider range of motion. On the second one, I decided to do it myself, and that's when I discovered how easy the steering was to work with because of how you can just reach in and disconnect the loops from the post and just disconnect the loop lines, and that's what I did. And when I just switched the loop lines from one to the other, it was actually really quick to do. The hardest part was figuring out how it was all set up and what to do, and that's what partly this video is about. Again, I'll repeat, I'm sorry I didn't actually show you the lines inside because to take them apart, even though I said it was quick, it was enough of a pain. I wouldn't want to do it again if I don't have to. I'm not getting paid for this video, so I'm not going to take them apart until something happens. I would suggest researching knots before you start, especially stopper knots, which ones are most secure, which ones are easiest to untie, and how to join 2 lines together, especially with the loop to loop or the loop with sort of a reef loop knot. But there really isn't again, I'll repeat that first one I ever showed you in the video. They all have a loop. I just used on the one end though was the reef. So it really wasn't a tied loop, but it looks like a loop to loop. And you could find other information, especially this one. By the way, we're done with these lines. But this really annoyed me. These Hobies I bought, they didn't have an attachment for the. These revolutions. So the steering handle would lay over the line. I mean the carry handle. Just really poor design. Now the original Hobies, my 2018, and I had even one from 2010. I still have it. They had 2 bungees coming out here, so the one would go around, but the last 2 I bought didn't have this, so I had to put my own in. Which again, this is the point. Actually, these Hobies, everything's pretty easy to work on and fix once you understand what it is and you have the right knots and the right tool. The hardest part here, getting this darn screw-in connector. It's called the Hobie shock cord screw-in connector. Getting that out of there. I ended up using a pair of, oh God, I can't remember the name of them. Whatever, snap ring pliers. And then just for future, I put a little loop on here with rope, and there was a stopper knot inside. I didn't want to just put a bungee in case, sometimes you got to replace bungees. So this I'll never have to replace, and now I could just put new bungee whenever I want right in here. Also on the, I had to, with the, pulling it down rudder, when you let go, it pulls back into place because of the shock cord underneath. That shock cord broke on me, so I had to replace that. And you probably could find, and there's all kinds of information on the internet how to do some of these, except these steering lines, most of the information I found was obsolete, especially the Hobie Twist-n-Stow manual, which seems to be for kayaks that were back in 2010, because my 2018 have a whole different setup than that manual for the steering connection, although the up-down seems to be the same. Wow, this went really long. I feel like I redid all my lines without doing it again. I'm full of all kinds of tips. But again, disclaimer, I don't really know what I'm doing half the time, so don't listen to me. But the Hobies come with these foam blocks on Revolution, and I suggest taking them out. I take them out of mine because they're not fixed in there. They're just hanging in there loose. So they're not supporting anything. And the idea that they would provide flotation if I were to sink, nah. They bounce around when you're on, I rooftop them, they bounce around. They're always in different positions in there because they're loose. You could try and wedge them in under the seat, but nah, they don't stay there. Now, on other Hobie models, they're important. They provide some support and they really don't move, but not on the Revolutions. And honestly, I know I get grief for this. The idea that these would be a savior in the capsize event, phew, for me, I know I could get caught by a storm, but I'm rarely out, and that would happen. I'm not out in the ocean, by the way. I'm just, I'm fishing calm places. So I guess for some people it would be important, but nah, I take them out.